Welcome to the Winning Playbook Real Estate Edition this morning. Just a reminder of the rules. We're all realtors here and abide by the code of ethics. If you guys are in a place to turn on your cameras and participate, we'd love to have you guys participate with us. And if you have any other comments and you're shy and you just want to put them in the chat, that's perfectly fine as well. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about contract and contract management negotiations and some deals that may have been challenging. One that I had personally that I thought came to mind this morning was I had a listing one time a few years back, and it was in a pretty competitive market, of course, at that point, and we were able to get the property under contract fairly quickly, but it was a little bit of an older property. We got it under contract, and then we had some other people wanting to put a offer in, and so I encouraged our seller to look at potential backups. And so the first deal that we had it under contract, and the guy went in for inspection. And what happened was when he went in for the inspection, in one of the bathrooms, the ceiling caved in. And so when the guy came in for inspection, we had a hot mess in the bathroom. My clients happened to be out of town at that point, and so it was a bit of tension, of course. The ceiling caved in because I'm sure some of you guys are aware, if you have the air handler in the ceiling in the attic space, there's typically a drip pan to protect against that, and actually a valve that shuts it off automatically if the water gets to a certain level. Well, his valve actuator that trips it off did not trip it off, and the pan overflowed, and so we had the ceiling crash in. So we had to hurry up and get that fixed, and that contract, they decided not to move forward just for that one reason, thinking, in their mind, oh, how many more problems are there with this property, right? So of course we had the backup come in on that deal, which I think, CJ, you had something similar happen at your house, right? With your ceiling coming in.
Oh yeah, that's not good. Not good.
So, but we had the backup come in and pop in off of that after we got it fixed, and we were under contract in the inspection period, and this was on a septic system. And during the inspection period, the guy didn't have the septic inspected, and the agent asked us afterwards, could no problems here, but could you let us inspect it after the inspection period, but not before closing. And I was educating my client on the potentials of that, and in his mind, he's like, I'm not hiding anything, like we might as well let them do it or whatever. And anyway, it ended up being a point of contention because the guy was like, whoever inspected it on his end acted like there was all kinds of stuff wrong with it, and this is going to be a big deal. Anyway, it was a point of contention throughout the entire deal. We ended up getting it worked out, and so that for me was an experience in which it's a catch-22. Do you're not trying to hide anything, but if you didn't let them do it, is that a scenario where it looks like you're hiding something? So just wanted to get your all's thoughts on that scenario, and kind of with some of your experience, what would have you done in that scenario? I mean, obviously that's a small picture, a glimpse of all the details, but essentially it's that whole negotiation period during repairs, obviously, or outside of repairs, just within the contract. Anyone have any input or comments on my scenario?
I mean, what was their reasoning for not just doing the inspection during the inspection period?
I think it was a kind of an afterthought, right? Like he was dealing with an agent that either wasn't, uh, privy to that, or wasn't thinking that, oh, we needed to get that done.
Right.
This the field lines on this particular property were significantly further away from the house.
Mhm.
And it actually went through a bit of a wooded area, and then came to a field that was, I mean, I would say it was probably 50 yards away from the house. So it was good ways away.
Mhm.
Um, and so, I don't remember exactly why, but I feel like it was just, kind of an afterthought in that case.
I feel like anytime I've had things that in my contracts that have lingered past, the dates that we have in writing on the contract, I feel like it always causes more issues. Like, I feel like, obviously there's a reason why we have the inspection period, so we can keep things in a timely manner and not get
Right.
days before closing and all of a sudden there's tensions high. So I feel like there's a reason why we have the inspection period, and we should probably, as far as we can, stick to that and not allow people to go outside of it. But I do get your point of you don't want to hide something and make them think that there's issues, and but I feel like us as realtors, it's probably our job to keep to the timelines and explain why. And
Yeah. Well, and what else added to the tension from a seller's point of view is, he was under contract on another property, and he didn't really want this deal to fall out, and have to start all over again. We didn't have a backup, again in this scenario. And so we
just
got,
want to play it out.
we got pushed into some,
Yeah,
timelines and pressure through that process. So,
right.
um, so for him, he was like, I don't have anything to hide, and I really want to make this deal work. And I did talk to him through it and say, hey, well, here's some potentials that you know that could come up and delay, or they could walk or whatever. So, and that was a little bit of the threatening aspect from the buyer side too. Is like, well,
Mhm.
we may move on, to a different property. So
Yeah.
anyway, so it's kind of uh, through that challenge. But does anyone else have a scenario in which they were in the midst of a contract, and it really became kind of sticky or high tension, that they would like to share to the group?
I was just curious on if, since you were past your inspection period and whatnot, and this was just something in addition to, if he did back out, he'd lose his earnest money, right?
Yeah, he would have. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was more, again, yes, you get the the money as the seller, but in their scenario, they would lose the house that they wanted, that they were trying to purchase on the back end too. So it's like, he was kind of stuck, and he felt kind of stuck, like, oh, I got to let this guy do it. Which I mean, that comes up as a part of it. And for us, we really need to be calm in those scenarios, because at the same time, as much as I felt like, this buyer was trying to screw my client and, cause all this undue arrest, undue stress, I just had to kind of be even keel and calm in that process for sure.
So I had
Taylor, do you have something?
Yeah, so I had a situation, it was just with the way we did wording in the contract.
Mm.
Um, so I had a deal where I didn't know these people, they were actually walk-ins. But I knew they were from Florida, and I found so this couple was purchasing the home, but then their parents were kind of in the background, I think, helping with things. And they happen to be realtors in Florida.
Okay.
So there's different custom things they do in Florida, whatever, than what we do here.
Right.
So anyway, we worked out this deal on this house, and what was confusing is I was speaking to who my clients were, the people on the contract, but apparently there was other conversations going on with them and their parents, the realtors
Right.
from Florida.
Right.
Okay. So what I had spoken to with my clients, and what we agreed on when we wrote the contract was that we were not going to ask for any closing costs at all, like nothing. They weren't going to pay anything. And my understanding with the other realtor when we discussed all this was they weren't paying anything in closing costs. And this is where it got us. When I wrote the contract, and the understanding between my clients and the other people was closing costs was sellers not contributing anything. Well, where it got confusing was when we got the Alta title,
Yep.
they did not consider closing costs. And since I did not specify that out in the wording, even though I was under the understanding, my clients and the other realtor, everybody was on the same page, the parents were not. And I don't know if they're footing the bill or something, but then they came, and this is where I had no thick skin at all. I was very new to this. And the parents called me and started, talking very not nice to me, telling me that they would not be closing this deal because they were not paying title. That was the seller's expense. And I was trying to explain to them that, well, here in Tennessee, it's either, it's whatever's in the contract, whoever, it's not expected. It's not a rule that one person's going to pay it or the other person.
Right.
And so I had to dry my tears from the way they were speaking to me and go call the other agent and explain to them what was happening. And she was saying, well, we were under the understanding. I said, I know, but apparently they were not. And then, so thankfully, she was very nice. And she said, well, I guess I should have caught in the way the wording was that we should have specified that. So she was very, had a lot of grace with me. And so she and I actually both had to end up splitting the title just to get it closed. Because my people were not going to allow my client, the parents were not going to allow my clients to move on without that being paid. So that hurt a little bit, having to hit my commission. But thankfully the other agent helped me out with that and we both split it. But that's where I learned very quickly to really be specific in how I word things when it comes to closing costs, and even things within closing costs, just detailing everything out so that there's no confusion at all.
Well, when I look at it from a perspective, and I didn't see that contract, but our contracts are written in a lot. They're written very specifically. So in your case, it sounds like the understanding, between your clients and the other people was perfectly fine. For those of you that don't know, in the state of Florida, their contract is written where the seller pays for all title expenses, and that's already written specifically in Florida contracts. And so that's why in their minds as Florida realtors that they weren't going to allow that to happen. But the other thing that I see and hear on your consultations, and you may have done this and they probably, backdoored you, but, I always ask the question to the people when I'm talking to them, is there anyone else that is going to be privy to making this decision, with you, or have input in the decision of you moving forward on this property?
Right.
Especially, was she a first-time home buyer or just happened to be buying in Tennessee for the first time?
I don't think they were. I mean, I can't remember now. It's been several years, but they weren't young by any means. It was a couple with children. So they were probably in their 30s even. So I don't remember if this was their first. I don't think it was, but the parent, I think it was her parents. They were very much in the decision-making process.
That always puts a wrinkle in cousin, grandma, parents, and especially if they're, helping out with the down payment or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. And I see it a lot with first time home buyers, and I'm sure I would be like that with my daughter or son the first time they're buying
Yeah,
property. So
true.
anyway, but thank you for sharing. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Would anybody else like to share a challenge that they might have faced, or a scenario that you took from and learned from?
I'm not
do.
on video, but whenever she's done, then I'll talk. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Angie.
So if the babies will hush long enough, sorry if you hear them screaming in the background. So whenever I guess I had only been in for maybe 2 or 3 years in real estate. Maybe 2 years. And I had some clients that were buying a new build it was a smaller builder. It wasn't like an Old South. But this was a mistake that I made. So I had to learn from it. Luckily the builder was very, very easygoing. But my clients were they were using a VA loan to purchase, and they actually we were asking for the builder to pay closing costs, and I knew that, and I thought I put it in the contract, but I didn't. I left it out. And it was like, I want to say it was like $6,000 worth of closing costs. Like, it wasn't a little bit. It would have been the entire commission that I was supposed to make. And I wasn't even going to make that much because I was at a brokerage that did a split. But so after the fact, like, everything signed, sealed, delivered, and then with the contract, and then I realized that I forgot to add it in. So I called the agent, and I actually talked with the builder and explained, I fessed up and I was like, hey, I screwed up. Like, my clients, we were supposed to be asking you for closing cost. I completely failed to put it in the contract. Are you willing, is there anything that you're willing to do to work with me? And he actually agreed. He was like, how much did they want? And I told him, and he agreed to do it. I don't think nowadays that people, or especially the larger companies, are that graceful or, that willing to help with you. But it definitely helped me because I was newer. Like I said, that wasn't even a cover. Like, I didn't even have enough commission to pay for it. Had he not worked with me.
Yeah.
But I definitely learned. So now whenever I'm filling out a contract, I always, always, always double check any closing costs, title, anything we're asking for. I go back and look over it and make sure it's right. So now I like triple check every contract before I send it for signatures.
Nice. Did you lose sleep the night before you had to call him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I lost sleep for probably more than one night just because I
Right.
couldn't believe I did that. I was so devastated, like, and beating myself up over it. But it was definitely in the beginning of real estate, and we all make mistakes. And I was just grateful that it wasn't something that couldn't be fixed, that it
Right.
wasn't like, we were at the closing table and then I realized it.
Right.
And those have been repeat customers. I've actually sold 4 houses. I've done four deals with them
Awesome.
over the last 10 years.
Well, thank you for sharing. Marla?
Well, mine is kind of similar, but I was not a newbie. This was more recent, and it was over closing costs as well. And it was written in the contract, that we were asking for closing costs from the seller. And we go when we do it, when everything's going on, and I mentioned closing costs, and he was like, we're not paying closing costs. I'm like, you agreed to it, and it's in the contract. And he was like, I said, it's in special steps. It's in special steps. And he went over it and over it and over it. And he was like, no, it's in special assessments. Oh boy. So he talked to his broker, and he was like, bottom line is that it is written in the contract, and it is my fault that I did not check you on this, and we are down to pay it and everything's good. But And I was like, I know I'm the idiot. I claim it, you know, and he gave us grace and they did pay the closing costs, but make sure you put it in the right spot of the contract.
Thank you for being vulnerable.
Well,
Yeah,
Rick
we
could have
all.
called me out because he was the broker. Like I said, wasn't a newbie.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing.
I have an experience I'd like to share. Good morning.
Oh, thank you.
Can
Good
you
morning,
hear me?
Gay. Yes,
Good
we
morning.
can.
Well, the moral to my story for me is that sometimes you just have to take the high road. And even if it's not your mistake, it's better to preserve the relationship than to blow everything. So it was my listing. And it was written in the listing that the seller was going to take the washer and the dryer, and they were gas. All right.
Mm.
So an investor who's also a very wealthy broker here in our city, which just information, purchased that, and it was cash buy. So we had the closing scheduled, and he wanted to go and do the walkthrough the morning of. Well, he didn't do the final walkthrough, and he signed that he would, skip the walkthrough. And so she moved, and she didn't have a lot of money, and she was not well. She had a very serious illness, which she has since passed from, but she took the washer and the dryer. And of course, I didn't know that, except that I got to my office. I was with another company, and my broker was waiting for me, and he had a call from the buyer, who was the broker of that company. And he had been to the city and swore out a warrant for theft that was to be
Whoa.
served on me and the woman. And he was giving me until such and such a time to get those appliances back at that house. So I didn't even have a key. I mean,
Right.
I had come and got the key, but didn't do the walkthrough. So, and it was not a lot of commission. I did 2% to help her out, blah, blah, blah. So I called her and I said, that was not in the contract. This woman was an insurance adjuster, and she had signed accepting that he was, that the appliances stayed, all of the appliances, and his stipulated washer and dryer. So I thought it was odd that she signed it, but she was going through a divorce. It was just a bad time in her life, and she signed it, and I thought all was well. Well, no sooner had my broker delivered the bad news until her father called me out of Memphis. This was another one of the when the family gets involved things, and he was just calling me everything but my mother's child. And he said, that my daughter put that in her listing, that it went with her, and blah, blah, blah. I said, your daughter is an insurance adjuster and she signed it, and I don't know what else to say to you. And he said, well, if she's got to give those back, I expect you to replace them. I'm like, my goodness, what am I going to do? So here's what I did. I had to pay 2 guys in a truck to go and get that washer and dryer. And the broker said, I don't have a key. Do you want to meet me over there and I will have them delivered? So I had it delivered, paid that bill, and I bought a washer and dryer for this girl because I felt bad that she was so sick. And I mean, honest to God, 2%, and it was several years ago, so property had not shot through the roof then.
Right.
And the broker just said, well, set them outside the garage door, that's fine. And I said, okay, but he is a broker. It's a well-known company here, and I just ate it and went on. What else can you do? Sometimes you just have to take the high road and believe that being that flexible, that number one, you preserve your name. Number two, the business comes back to you, and it did.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, sometimes we have to take it on the chin.
That was a bad one.
Yeah.
But he was serious, and he was serious.
Well, yeah, he put out a warrant.
And it was his property. Honestly, it was, because she signed that she would leave it, and she didn't.
Yeah.
So from now on, what I've done since then, when we agree to leave things, I'll go over that with the seller. Now, that they're asking for A, B, C, D. Are you okay with that? And then there's not any cloudy thinking on that situation anymore. I learned a hard lesson.
I don't think he should have went to that extreme. He should have had open communication beforehand and tried to work it out before doing that. That was just going to the extreme too quickly.
Yeah, he was,
Well,
it sounds like he was kind of a stickler like that.
well, he
He
was
needed
serious.
prayed for.
He wasn't going to budge, and my God, he probably could have bought the company that makes
Yeah.
the washers and the dryers. They have a lot of money.
Right.
But I did, and so it's over and done with.
I had kind of a similar situation, not a washer and dryer issue, but it was something that was written in the contract that was supposed to stay. And mine was, it was a house in Franklin, and the people that were I had the listing, and the people that were purchasing it were paying cash. So they obviously had money they were bringing to the deal. And cause it was like, I don't know, close to 600,000. And, anyway, my client was older, and her husband had passed away, and she was already kind of upset about having to sell the house. And the person that was purchasing it wrote in the contract they wanted this little fountain to stay that was in the back, like on the back porch. And it was just a plug-in fountain. So it wasn't like a big, like, I know fountains can be expensive when they're like in the yard, things
Right.
like that, but it wasn't anything like that. It was a plug-in fountain. Well, she had said she wanted that to stay. And so I was over the phone. I went with my client. I was like, they're asking for this to stay. They're asking for that to stay. And I was telling her everything. And she's like, well, yeah, I guess that's okay. Well, then so she signed it, accepted the contract, whatever. The next day she called me and she was like, Taylor, I was just thinking about it. That fountain that they asked to stay on the back was a gift from my husband who had passed away. She's like, I can't let that stay. And I'm thinking, like, I was like, oh, well, I mean, that should be fine. I'll let them know it's sentimental. It's just, like, I'll explain it to them. I'm sure it shouldn't be a big deal. When I called the other agent, she was like, she also thought, oh, that shouldn't be a big deal. So she called me back after she spoke to her buyers and was like, apparently that fountain made the house for this lady. Like, she wants that, like, she's not going to buy this house without that fountain on the back porch. And I'm like, well, it's not replaceable for my client. Like, it's just not an option. I was like, can I buy her another fountain at this point? You know what I mean? Like, what can I do?
Right.
So I'm thinking like, okay, I'll go to Lowe's or something and find like $150 fountain or something. This agent starts sending me pictures and things where this lady's asking for like $1,000, $1,500 fountains. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I can no. Like, I even went to the extent of like going to a place and showing pictures of this fountain, trying to find the exact one, and nobody made this fountain. I mean, it was insane how much work I had to do over a fountain. Finally, I told the other agent, I said, I'm just going to give you, I can't remember how much, it was like $200 or $300. I said, I'm just going to give you this much and you can put it towards whatever this, I said, I'm not going to go buy $1,000 fountain. I'm just not, like, I just
Right.
can't. That's ridiculous. And so she was like, no, so she ended up, I think she spent like $400 and we both combined our money and bought this woman a fountain to get this deal closed. It was crazy. But it was one of those things like Gay said, just really go through and make sure people understand before they're accepting something, because you never know what somebody's going to get attached to.
Yeah.
So I really make sure now, if it's like a chandelier or something that's attached to the house, like, I really, really make sure all that's clear with people. I'm like, take it down before we take pictures. Like, let's just not
Yeah.
go through any moments like that.
Any temptation, yeah, somebody
Anything, 'cause
asking for
people,
something,
yeah,
because they're
exactly.
gonna ask for it or they're gonna see it's there and
Oh yeah.
hey, here's this. And probably even in that case with the fountain, it's like, it's sort of personal property, right? So like, well,
Right.
yeah, we could talk about that. If you're asking for it, then we could talk about it, but we're gonna put it on the bill of sale outside of the contract,
Yeah.
kind of deal.
Well, and normally I would have, but since it was cash, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
it was more lenient to put things in there like that. And so I didn't even,
Sure,
but
that's true.
yeah, but it just started getting, I was like, this is out of hand. This is insane. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
CJ, you've tried to unmute a few times. Did you have something that you wanted to share?
I got all kinds. I mean, which deal? Unlike Gay, I haven't been accused of stealing appliances, but I've had to buy some. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, everyone's talking about the same thing basically, and it boils down
yeah,
to communication with the other side. And I had that happen just like my past deal here that I'm in the middle of. You know, if you have good communication and you establish that from the beginning, it's going to go far for you. But
sure,
expectations on both sides, you know, they're going to do what they have to for their client. You're going to do what you have to. The more that you do up front to like just make it very clear what is conveying, what the expectations are, then the negotiations are a lot more comfortable. And it
yeah,
seems like you're at each other's throat a lot less. But the one thing that we do have out there, and speaking as technically a newer agent, I've only been doing this, what, 4 years or 5 years or something like that. Um, you got these agents out there at 30 years and they still look down on you. They think they know everything about everything, and you get into deals with them and they try to impress that upon you. I'm not the guy that's impressed. So my thing is though, is we have something to learn from each other. So when we get into that negotiation phase, I mean, if my clients have made it, you know, apparent on the paperwork, and I have as well, something doesn't convey, I don't like being bullied in the deal. But we had something like that recently where my client, kind of similar to Taylor, she makes her own curtains. And I got caught in this because I considered that personal property.
mm,
Well, it's not. If you look
right,
on the purchase and sale agreement, for some reason, blinds, obviously they're attached, but
great,
draperies and
yeah,
curtains are in the purchase and sale agreement. And I think I got a little confused by that because I've been asked by lenders recently to remove those from the contract, even though they're in the contract. They're asking me not to include it because they won't consider it. And I don't understand that, but clearly
yeah,
it's in the purchase and sale agreement. So if something like that is not going to convey, I mean, we got to really be careful when we do our listing agreements and whatnot, because we could get caught and then you're in a bad situation. Luckily, I had a good rapport with the other agent. I told her, I said, look, this is sentimental. We were in the negotiation phase of the offer. The lady wanted them, but I just basically told him, I said, look, it's non-negotiable. These are sentimental items. She makes her own curtains. They're going with her. If you
yeah,
guys don't want the house because of that, then you know
so
we'll
be
keep. Yeah. But then
it.
on that too, more recently, we got into, and this is for all the agents, just because something I learned. Um, we give so much control to the other side when we're doing a listing, and that control isn't with the other agent. And often they're inexperienced in this too, because when they go and do their inspections, they are completely 100% relying, as are those clients, on what that inspector says. And I got into a situation this weekend after being under contract, like only had this property on the market 2 days. You know, it just flew. It went over market. It was awesome. The inspector came in there, scared these people so bad about things that he had said that they backed out of the deal. So luckily, again, have a very good rapport with the other agent. We talk, you know, on the phone. It's not just an email transaction, things like that. I don't ever encourage that anyway. But she called me and told me what was said, what her clients were concerned about. They wanted to make the deal work. So we were talking about it. I actually went out there and I met with the clients to address things that were said on the inspection report so they could see for themselves. Because basically, I told her, I said, no, look, that's not true. It does have upgraded plumbing, it does have upgraded electrical. There's GFCI throughout, there's this in there, there's, you know, all the things that they had basically were concerned about. So, bottom line is, the one thing that was a concern we're getting addressed, which we're putting on a new roof. They had to anyway, so it's not an issue. All the other things, the inspector had blown it so out of proportion, and they actually went out there. They crawled under the house themselves. They saw what we were talking about. We're back under contract. So that was pretty crazy. I've never had that happen where you actually get to meet with your buyers and their agent, and that agent is leaning on you, to say, hey, help me. That was pretty cool. So,
Well, that's a
but
great example of, cooperation, right? Like the whole process for us as agents is to be and the whole idea of cooperating broker, right? Yes, you have your fiduciary responsibility to your client, but we're bringing in a third party vendor that has his opinion or her opinion on this or that. And at the end of the day, it's their decision to assess risk and assess, get the information that makes, sense for them to make that decision. And being that agent, was open-minded and cool, collected, and, have that, calmness to them, to help, ask questions and get a good understanding of working with you. Now, had you known this agent prior to this offer? Or?
no, I'd never even heard of her. And
Okay.
actually, after this deal, because she had canceled, they were very emotional about it. Obviously, the wife was
Sure.
extremely upset. They canceled their termite because they thought there was nothing they could do. They actually leaned on to me, and I helped them get a termite guy that could come out the next day, and it's already done
Yeah.
the report and everything. So, but I always look at, like, from that experience too, it just kind of reiterated to me, yeah, I'm representing my clients, but in reality, this agent that's bringing their clients, that's my customer. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in communication with them constantly, that
Yeah.
we're talking about where they're at in the process, because if we hadn't done that, I mean, it just would have been gone. Luckily, everybody wanted to make the deal work, but it was kind of a reiteration for me as to why, and I hear this a lot too. So, and I take it with a grain of salt to a point, but I never want to be that guy, because I'll call these agents when I'm presenting an offer or something like that and talking with them, introducing myself, and they tell you all the time, I don't ever get that. You're the first person to, or, very few agents call me, to
Right.
talk about their offer or whatever. And that goes such a long way in getting your offer accepted, you know.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it
Well,
was a good
that's
deal, and
in.
look, we saved it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it says you always hear so much negativity about agents or our industry, or, not having professionals in it. And that's an example of where the good things that we don't typically talk about, right? Like
Yeah.
for that example, and to know that, you guys were able to work together and have that, right end of communication. It also shows that, networking with other agents is very important. CJ is very active in networking with lots of agents. He goes to different MTAR events and things like that. So, I encourage you that, if you can, is to do that and meet other people and see who else is out there, because it does make a difference in the fact that, okay, hey, just like it is with your clients and your potential customers, is that the agents are getting to see who you are and trust you and believe in you, and know that, okay, this person's gonna, you know uh, 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 take a good, I'm gonna have a good experience or a good deal with this person because of the way that I've already met them. They seem to be nice and truthful, and I've been able to have really good conversations with them previously, and it wasn't even within a deal. That's not 100%, but it does give some good indicators on this thing. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing,
and
CJ.
both our clients, I mean, on both sides now, they saw how,
You
their
guys handle it.
realtor reacted and worked together. My clients saw how I reacted to them and worked together. So, there's a lot of, obviously, we're experiencing it. Corinne, you know about it 'cause you're involved, very heavily in it with this lawsuit and things and whatever. We've got a stigma on us anyway. So,
Yep.
my livelihood is real estate, whether I'm investing or I'm, selling a house, listing a house, whatever. So that being said, my image, very important, but realtors in general and as a whole, I mean, we've got to put forth a good image, because those
Yep.
clients on each side, they're going to share that, and they're already coming in with this persona about how we are, or this impression of how realtors in general are. I love proving people wrong. So the fact that they got to see that, they're going to share that with somebody. And, you know, if we want to keep our livelihood and have less, you know, politics involved, we just have to do our job right.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you again, CJ.
Yep.
Well, don't necessarily have a specific play of the week, but I do think from, you know, these conversations is a good way to consider to go back and look at your agreements and see the areas of especially on closing costs, which in that section, I encourage everybody to use a form called the RF 707. It has the additional contract language that was written by attorneys. So if you are asking for closing costs, it tells you specifically where to put that in the agreement and the specific language for closing costs. So that doesn't tend, you know, that will take away the ambiguity. I know Rick talks about that all the time. You know, we're not writing contract, we're filling in the blanks. And if they give us the language for the blanks already, I encourage you guys to use that. So RF 707, pull that document up and use that with your agreements. If you don't feel comfortable with the contracts and you know, have a little anxious about it, it's something that you really need to know inside and out, and how to explain it and talk to a buyer about it. I encourage you guys to get together and role play with somebody and walk through those agreements so you know exactly what you're explaining and talking to folks about. But thank you guys for coming this week. And we'll see you guys next week. You guys have a wonderful week.